El Cucuy, a Bogeyman Cuento in English and Spanish as told by Joe Hayes. Who hasn't heard of El Viejo Cucuy? Some call him El Cucuy de la Mañana, some call him El Abuelo. Some say he looks like a shaggy black bear, and some say he looks like a giant. But the ones who know best say El Cucuy is an old man with a back as crooked as a bent cedar branch. He lives in a cave in the mountains, and his right ear looks just like everyone else's. But his left ear is big and red, and with it he can hear everything. El Cucuy knows when children aren't behaving themselves, and sometimes he comes down from his cave in the mountains to carry bad children away. In many mountain villages, they tell about 3 sisters who lived back in the old days. Their mother had died and their father was raising the girls all by himself. The youngest girl was very helpful. She kept the house clean and had supper ready for her father when he came back home from work. But the 2 older girls were lazy and they didn't do a thing to help out. It sounds like Cinderella. Why do you work all the time? The big sister said. Come outside and play. And the little sister would answer, I'm just trying to make things a bit easier for our father. It's hard for him raising 3 girls all by himself. Oh, you're such a goody-goody, they said. Go ahead and work all day. We're going to stay outside and play. Sometimes when the man got home in the evening and he saw that his older daughters had done nothing but play all day, he said, You lazy girls, one of these days I'm going to call El Cucuy on you. Oh, Papa, they said, you wouldn't call El Cucuy on your own daughters, would you? Then they would go away and whisper to each other, There's no such thing as El Cucuy. That's just something parents made up. A veces cuando... Oh, that's in Spanish. One day, the older girls not only wouldn't help their little sister, they did everything they could to make her work harder. When she was trying to sweep the floor, they took the ashes from the fireplace and threw them all over the room. And later, when she was washing her father's clothes, the older sisters tied knots in the wet shirts, and the younger girl couldn't get the knots out. When the man got home that evening and he found out what had been going on, he said, This time, I really am going to call El Cucuy on you. He grabbed the 2 girls by the arm and he turned toward the mountain and called out, Cucuy, Cucuy, baja pero llevarte a estas malcriadas. Come and get these bad girls. And the girls stood looking at each other and trembling. But nothing happened. And then they whispered, It's just like we always said. There's no such thing as El Cucuy. And they made up a game, chasing each other around the house, hollering, Cucuy, Cucuy. But that evening when the sun was setting and the sky was bright red with the sunset, down from the mountain came El Cucuy. His big red ear was glowing in the evening light. And he came into the village and everyone ran to hide, but he went on down the road till he came to the girls' house. He walked inside and picked up the 2 sisters right from the supper table and carried them away. It's a creepy picture. They cried and begged him to let them go. But even though El Cucuy could hear everything with his big red ear, he didn't seem to be hearing a thing. He pulled them along beside him, and their dresses got torn on the cactus, and their legs were all scratched, and their faces were covered with dust, and the tears made little rivers through the dirt on their cheeks. And he carried them to his cave in the mountains and put them in the deepest part. The days passed by so slowly, and the girls sat in the cave, hugging each other and saying, Won't we ever go home again? Won't we ever see our father and our good little sister again? If El Cucuy would hear them, he would poke his head into their room and growl, Your father and your little sister are glad to be rid of you. But he knew it wasn't true. He could hear everything, and he knew that after work, the girl's father spent every evening in the mountains looking for El Cucuy's cave. He hadn't slept a wink since his daughters had been carried away. And then one day, a boy from the village took his family's goats up into the mountainside to eat grass. Before he mounted his burro to start for home at the end of the day, he counted the goats to make sure he had them all, and one was missing. He started up the mountain looking for the missing goat, and from time to time he would stop to listen. And once he stopped, he could hear the goat bleeding, and he followed the sound, and it grew louder and louder, and he spotted the goat with its foot caught in a crack in the rocks. The boy ran to the goat to comfort it and set it free. And then, when the goat stopped bleating, the boy noticed a different crying sound, and it seemed to come from below him. He looked down deep into the crack in the rocks, and he saw the girls down in the cave. And the boy shouted, "What are you doing down there?" And the girls looked up and pleaded, "El Cucuy has us here in his cave. Please help us out." The boy took off his jacket to lower to the girls down like a rope, and he helped them climb up out of the cave and then stumbled down the mountain to where the herd of goats was waiting. The boy put the girls on his burro and started down the winding path to the valley. They had hardly started when they met up with the girls' father and little sister coming up the mountain to look for them. And the girls jumped to the ground and ran crying to their father, and he ran up the trail to meet them. And so did their little sister. They all hugged each other, and the girls said to their father, "Please, please don't ever call El Cucuy on us again." And he never did. He never had any reason to. From that day on, those two girls were the most polite and helpful girls living in that little town. And they grew up and got married and had children of their own, and in time, grandchildren and great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren. And even today, if you go to that town, you'll see some children who are very tidy and polite to everyone. And you can ask the people, "Who are those nice children?" And they'll tell you. Those are the great-great-grandchildren of the two girls who were carried away by El Cucuy once a long, long time ago.